So recently I decided that I wanted to platinum and 100% complete every game in the Mass Effect series, starting from Mass Effect 1 all the way through to Mass Effect Andromeda, and in today's video we are going to be starting that journey by completing and platinuming the very first game in the series, which consists of 35 trophies including the platinum. Along with completing the main games, I will also be taking on the extra challenge of unlocking all 11 trophies added with the Legendary Edition trophy list, with 3 of the trophies requiring us to beat each game on Insanity difficulty, the hardest difficulty in the game. But with that, we do have a decently lengthier video to get through, so with the intro out of the way, let's start Mass Effect 1. Before we can even begin the game, there's a couple of things I needed to take care of first. One was to ensure I was playing on Insanity difficulty. Now, although this is not required for the Platinum, the Legendary Edition does have its own separate trophy list, and completing each game on Insanity will nab us a total of 3 trophies. Of course, I'm going for that 100% across all games, so this is something that I have to do. Then we actually have to create our Commander Shepard, and honestly, I've always quite liked the look of the default Shepard, so I went with him in terms of looks. For my class though, I typically choose Soldier, mainly because I like to be the main damage dealer and taker, but also because I like the fact that it forces me to take different crewmates on different missions to make the most out of their abilities. However, in this game there are numerous trophies for using specific skills, so to make earning those easier, I made the conscientious choice to choose Engineer. That way, if I'm on a mission where none of my squad mates has any tech abilities, I can still use them myself thanks to being an engineer and make extra progress towards the trophies. Although honestly, in hindsight, I didn't need to do this at all, so next time I'll most likely stick with the Soldier class. With that though, we can now officially start the game. We begin the game on board the Normandy SR-1 ship under the command of Captain Anderson. We were on our way to Eden Prime with the main goal of successfully securing a Prothean beacon, a piece of technology left behind by an ancient advanced race with the belief that it has information that can help the betterment of not just humanity, but every race in space. They believe this because the Protheans are also the ones who seemingly created the Mass Effect relays that allowed humanity and the rest of space to advance in space travel so quickly. This mission also just so happened to be our trial set by a Turian Spectre named Ilos to see if we have what it takes to join the Spectres, one of the most revered and feared groups in the galaxy. Of course though, this wasn't going to be a simple walk in the park, as we receive an emergency recording showing security around the beacon under attack, and so now we must also try to save them. Before heading down to help secure the area though, I make sure to talk to Captain Anderson and ask him for information on the Prothean race to add to our codex. Typically I wouldn't even bother mentioning something like this, but there is actually a trophy for finding all primary alien race codex entries, and this is one of the only, if not the only, missable entry, and they throw it at you right at the beginning of the game, meaning if you didn't re-engage in conversation with Anderson, this would be easily missed. After ensuring we've got everything we need though, we then head down onto Eden Prime, where we notice that the attacks aren't just from some random raiders, but were actually the Geth, a powerful synthetic race that seem to now want nothing more than to kill everyone, as demonstrated by our man Jenkins being the first of our squad mates to meet their end at the hands of them. Me and Caden then push through, wiping out any Geth in our path, and also managed to recruit another squad mate called Ashley, who we're definitely going to bang later. Continuing on, we eventually discover that Nihilus wasn't the only Spectre on Eden Prime, and that another by the name of Saren was also here. However, it seemed that Saren no longer served the Spectres and instead now works with the Geth, and when Nihilus's back is turned, he proceeds to put one in the back of his head. At this point, Saren is then able to get what he wants from the beacon, so now our mission was to push through the facility, taking out all of the Geth that stayed behind, disarming all of the bombs that had been set, and recovering what we can from the beacon. Now this is where the bulk of the combat takes place during our opening mission, and I think now's a good time to mention that I'm really not a fan of the combat in Mass Effect, especially in the first game. Don't get me wrong, it's enjoyable, but I always found it to be somewhat robotic. Everything just feels a little stiff. I'm not saying it's the worst combat I've ever experienced, but I wish to a certain extent it felt a little bit more lively, you know, it flowed a little bit more. It would be nice. It does improve, but the first game, yeah, in terms of gameplay it hasn't aged well. Of course, we eventually find the beacon, however for some reason Ashley begins to get pulled towards it, so we rush in to save the day. This had its ramifications though, as all of a sudden we begin floating in the air and get shown a series of images and visions that we can't quite make out, but we know it's important. This does unfortunately break the conduit and we end up passing out. However, we do unlock our very first trophy of the game. Once back in the land of the living, we decide to head to the Citadel to explain the situation on Eden Prime to the council, and to also reveal that Saren has gone rogue and that given his hatred for humans, this attack was kind of like an act of war on humanity. However, with the death of one Spectre agent and failure to retrieve the beacon in one piece, the council refuses to believe our claims without any significant proof, and so now we must find the proof we need in order to convince the council that Saren is a real threat. And with that, Anderson suggests looking into someone called the Shadow Broker, who deals in information as he could have something on Saren. This essentially leads us to making our way around the Citadel to recruit the help of a few allies. Those being Garrus, Rex, and eventually Tally, who also happens to be the Curian that has the dirt we need to expose Saren. Basically, Saren is using the Geth to help him find something known as the Conduit, which he believes will allow him to bring back the Reapers, an ancient race thought to only have one goal, and that was the extermination of all organic life. However, there is very little evidence to suggest they even exist. Before taking this information to the council though, it was now time to pick up and complete a bunch of assignments. This game's version of technically a side quest. Now, while we don't have to complete all of these, we do have to complete a good portion in order to unlock the trophy completionist later on. Now, while this means that I don't have to complete all of them, I actually don't know how many I need to complete, so throughout the playthrough I am going to be aiming to complete every single one, or at least as many as I can in one single playthrough. This is because I for some reason decided I'm going to be going for that true-ish 100% in terms of mission completion, because not only will I get a chunky amount of XP and money, but because many side quests will have some type of effect in one of the later games. Most of the time it's incredibly small, but some do offer a nice little bit of extra content we otherwise wouldn't have access to. So to just give you a brief idea of the kind of side quests I spent my time completing here, there was one where one of the aliens wanted me to help him gather data from some machines at a local casino. This device, however, was also intended to boost our odds of winning, so of course I made full use of that benefit, but instead of giving the device back to the alien, I instead turned it into the casino owner in exchange for some Paragon morality points, and even got paid for doing so. I also helped an Asari consort deal with a local commander giving her some grief, and in return we got to smash, which is a definite mission complete. There are quite a decent amount of assignments to pick up and complete here, with various assignments opening up at different points in the game. However, most if not all of them at the Citadel are timed as we get locked out of the Citadel towards the end of the game, in turn locking us out of these assignments. While going through all of this though, I was able to nab a few trophies while doing it. The first trophy we unlocked was also our very first skill related trophy, and that was the Sabotage Specialist trophy for using the Sabotage skill successfully a total of 25 times. And we also unlocked both the Sentinel and Krogan ally trophies for completing a total of 5 missions with both a Sentinel and a Krogan in our squad. After completing absolutely everything I could complete in the Citadel at the time though, I then decided the galaxy didn't have to wait for me to save it any longer, and so we return to the council to show them the evidence we have against Saren. At this point the council begins to take us a little bit more seriously and officially declares Saren a rogue Spectre and enlists us to take him down and stop his plans. And also because of our efforts and because we are now officially about to save the galaxy, they promote us to the rank of Spectre, allowing us access to anywhere and anything, within reason of course, and we get another story related trophy. After being promoted and while heading back towards the Normandy, I took the opportunity to turn in a quest that was nearby, and because I had Tally in my squad for 5 assignments at this point, we unlocked the Curian Ally trophy. Upon returning to the Normandy, we find Anderson and the Ambassador. Turns out if we were going to save the world, we are going to need a top-of-the-line ship, and so the council decided to relieve Anderson of his captain duties, and now the Normandy SR-1 was left in our very capable hands. At this point the Ambassador gives us information on recent Geth sightings, but also suggests that we should start our search for Saren with locating an Asari known as Dr. Liara Sioni. Apparently the info we had on Saren also revealed an accomplice to be an Asari matriarch called Benezia, who just just so happens to be the Doctor's mother, and as such the Doctor may know more about Saren and her mother's plans. Before leaving in search for the Doctor though, I made sure to speak to Anderson one more time and ask him for information about the Spectres. This in turn completes our codex entries on all primary alien races, and with it we unlock the easily missable Archivist trophy.
Rogue science.
So as I said a moment ago, we were heading to the Artemis Tau cluster, and our target was an archaeological dig site on the planet of Thurum. Now in terms of progressing through the planet, there's not really much to say. We first used the Mako to get around and do a bit of exploring, visiting various points of interest, grabbing gear, codex entries and XP, that sort of thing. But once we were where we needed to be quest-wise, it was a pretty linear path consisting mostly of killing, and for the most part this is what most of the explorable planets are like. It's not terrible, but definitely gets a bit tedious towards the end, especially if you're like me and doing pretty much every assignment in the game. Due to the sheer amount of enemies there were though, I was able to nab a couple more skill related trophies, those being the electronics and damping specialist trophies for using the overload and damping skills 25 times each. We eventually end up finding Dr. Sione, however finding ourselves having to make a quick escape due to the fact that we used a massive mining laser to break through the wall to reach her. While escaping, we also come across what I guess is considered our first boss fight of the game. Now this isn't actually a boss, it is just a normal enemy type, however they don't typically appear until a bit later in the game, and even then they can be a pain, so imagine how one of them is right at the start. Now the fight itself wasn't difficult, the enemies did do quite a bit of damage, but they wasn't really the main issue. The main issue was that both of my allies at the time would often get absolutely slapped by the Krogan and his buddies, which left me vulnerable and ultimately meant that I followed shortly after. And this happened a few times, but eventually I managed to get both my squad mates to, for the most part, stay in cover, and I was eventually able to take down the Krogan and his Geth buddies. And with that, we escaped the crumbling site and head back to the Normandy. This did manage to nab us another story-related trophy though. With the Doctor now back on the Normandy, she tells us that while she isn't involved in Saren's plans, she assumes that because he is working with her mother, he now seemingly wants the Doctor to join him, probably for her amount of knowledge on the Protheans. She also tells us that the Conduit is likely the key to bringing back the Reapers, and that what's happening now is part of a multi-thousand year cycle, although because there is so little evidence of any of this, most higher-ups don't even believe the Reapers are real. Even though she can't help us at the moment, she can help us in the long run, and we recruit her into our squad, which now means we have fully recruited every possible ally. No trophy for this, but thought you should know anyway. Now at this point I was itching to get more of the story complete, but I was also well aware of just how many assignments I still hadn't even picked up, let alone completed, and because I was playing on insanity difficulty, I didn't want to find myself in a situation where I was severely underleveled and struggling, so I decided to once again put saving the galaxy to one side and take on some more assignments. Now I'm not going to go into too much detail here, as I'm sure you all know what a side quest typically consists of, but just know that during this time we visited a bunch of different planets and usually found ourselves either saving or killing a bunch of people, be it alien or human, but purely because I like giving an example, one of the quests had us visiting a few different locations that just so happened to be the home of a few crime lords, which funnily enough another crime lord had actually hired us to take down. Now while I am all about bringing peace to the galaxy and stopping criminals like this, I'm also willing to give people a second chance, and instead of nailing 3 criminals in one go, I convinced the third to give up the life of crime in exchange for not being turned over to the Alliance, which of course she accepted. Now while doing all of these quests, I actually managed to unlock a whopping total of 7 trophies. The first 2 being the Medal of Exploration 1 and 2 trophies for landing on 1 and 4 different uncharted worlds. Of course completing assignments meant more ally trophies, and slowly but surely we unlocked the Turian, the Soldier and the Asari ally trophies for completing 5 assignments with each. And finally we unlocked 2 skill related trophies, those being the Throw and Walk Mastery trophies for using each of those skills 25 times. After completing quite a hefty amount of side quests, I once again turned my focus back onto the main story, with my next location being the planet of Noveria. You see, we have reason to believe that the Matriarch is somewhere on Noveria, and our hope is that we can find her, get information on Saren's plan, and hopefully be able to sway the Matriarch into working with us to take him down instead. When we arrive, we find ourselves at Port Hanshan and receive confirmation that the Matriarch is actually here. However, she had recently left the port and traveled travelled up to a mountain base known as Peak 15. Now, even though we were a Spectre, this didn't mean that we would be allowed to leave the port without a garage pass, and Annalise, the chief of the station, wasn't planning on giving us one anytime soon. So along with completing a bunch of side assignments in the area, I also decided to work with a Turian named Loric to get incriminating evidence proving that Chief Annalise is corrupt, and in the end we also managed to convince him to work with an undercover investigator called Gianna in order to bring Annalise down. Thankfully this all turned out perfectly. We helped the station get back on its feet by removing the corrupt positions of power, and in return we get given a garage pass allowing us access to the Mako and Peak 15. Once we make it to the mountain facility, we discover that not only is the matriarch actually here, but this facility also managed to bring back a long thought extinct alien species known as Arachni, known for being a major threat to life everywhere. These are basically spider-like creatures that like to spew acid at you. Oh, and some of the stronger ones, like a queen, also has the ability to control an individual's mind and influence their actions. So of course we now needed to find out why she wanted them. So yeah, not only were we now fighting against the Geth and Matriarch soldiers, but we also had to be on the lookout for giant spiders and potentially mind-controlled innocents looking to kill us. Having the decent amount of enemies we had though wasn't actually too bad. By this point I had some decent gear and had a decent level under my belt, so I found the majority of this pretty easy to go through. And even better is that while going through this area I managed to unlock another 4 skill related trophies, those being the Lift, Barrier, Singularity and Stasis Mastery trophies. Eventually we find the Matriarch, and I thought that bringing her daughter along might convince her to give up and help us, but apparently she doesn't care who's there, and we are then left to fight off a few waves of Geth. Of course they don't stop us, and we manage to take them all down before eventually moving on to the Matriarch. For a while she manages to snap out of the sort of mental grasp she seemed to be held in, and all of a sudden reveals all of the information she knows on Saren's plans. She explains that when people serve Saren at first, it's usually willingly, but eventually he takes you aboard his ship called the Sovereign, where he then begins to have you indoctrinated until you essentially become his puppet, willing to do anything he requests. She also tells us that their goal on Noveria wasn't to ally with the Arachni, but to use them to reveal the location of a Mass Effect relay, known as the Mu Relay, in search for something called the Conduit. They chose the Arachni specifically because they originally found the relay a fair few thousand years ago before disappearing, and taking the location of the Mu relay with them. Turns out that Benezia had achieved the goal of retrieving the coordinates of the Mu relay, and that Saren now has them, although she transfers the coordinates onto an OSD for us to use in the future. Unfortunately, this wasn't a happy ending for Benezia though, and Saren's influence eventually gets the better of her, and we are left but with no choice but to kill her. After doing so though, something weird happens, and this is that one of the dead Asari all of a sudden rises from the dead and begins talking to us. Luckily for us, we wasn't dealing with a zombie, but instead we were talking to the Arachni Queen held in the nearby containment tube. She tells us that the Arachni harbour no ill will against us and just want to be set free to live in peace. We do remind her though that her species was known for being a major threat to the galaxy, and while she says that it may have been the case, that was a good few thousand years ago and she wasn't even hatched when the Arachni disappeared. All she knows is that she wants to live in peace with the galaxy, but also wants to keep her race isolated away from everyone else. We have a bit of a Doctor Who style moment here and ultimately make the somewhat dubious decision to release her under the belief that she intends on sticking to her words. She tells us that the Arachni recognise what we have done for them, and we actually get to see the result of this outcome in a later game. And with that, we have now completed everything we needed to do on Noveria, unlocking another story related trophy. So with another main story mission out of the way, once again the galaxy saving was put on hold and I put a little bit more time into some more assignments, and during this time I managed to unlock 3 more trophies. The first was the Neural Shock Specialist for using the Neural Shock skill 25 times. The second was the 3rd Medal of Exploration trophy for landing on 8 uncharted worlds. And the third was the Principal Trophy for accumulating a total of 75% of the total possible Paragon or Renegade points. Very easily done, especially when completing as many assignments as you can, with as many upgrades into Charm and or Intimidation as you can. And in addition to those 3 main game trophies, we also unlock our very first trophy added with the Legendary Edition update, and that was the Recruit Trophy for killing a total of 250 enemies. Continuing on with the main story, we now found ourselves heading to the planet of Feros in search for a cipher that Liara believes will help us understand the visions we witness when interacting with the beacon on Eden Prime. While on Feros, we learn that the nearby corporation known as Exogeny was actually hiding something known as a thorian, basically a massive ancient plant that was around since before the Protheans. However, much like a lot of things in Mass Effect, this plant also had the power to control people's minds, turning them into mindless slaves, and so we had no choice but to help save the colony that was slowly but surely losing their minds. While searching for the cipher and trying to save the colony though, we do run into quite a decent amount of geth, and thankfully I was able to unlock my final 2 skill related trophies. The first being the AI hacking specialist trophy for using the AI hacking skill 25 times, and the second being the first aid specialist trophy for using our healable item known as Medigel a total of 50 times. We eventually find the location of and come face to face with the Thorian. Yeah, this was a big boy and he had to go down. Now, not only did this massive plant have a bunch of weird zombie-like creatures guarding it, but it also had the ability to give birth to Asari clones to come and attack us, and so we spent the next 10 minutes making our way around the Thorian's chamber, defending ourselves from the ungodly amount of enemies in the area and destroying key parts of the plant. Eventually we managed to destroy the plant, in turn freeing the mines and saving the lives of countless civilians, as well as freeing an Asari named Shiala. Shiala explains to us that she was serving matriarch Benezia when she had allied herself with Saren, which in turn caused Shiala to also ally with him. She tells us that Saren needed her biotic abilities to allow him to communicate with the Thorian, in which he then agreed to sacrifice Shiala to secure an alliance between himself and the Thorians. However, once he had what he needed, he betrayed them and ordered the Geth to burn all evidence of the Thorian's existence in the hopes that it would stop us from obtaining the cipher. Now, while in a way he succeeded, we couldn't obtain it from the Thorian, we could obtain it from Shiala, and this was because while helping Saren communicate, she needed access to his mind, so in turn she learned everything from the Thorian that he did, which thankfully she shares with us with no fuss. At this point though, we had successfully obtained the cipher and saved a colony, and I call that a job well done. Thankfully the game thought so too, as it rewards us with 2 trophies. The completionist trophy for completing the majority of the game, honestly a lot earlier than I thought I would have got it, but then again I have been consistently chipping away at assignments at every opportunity. And we also unlock another story related trophy for completing the planet of Feros. With another main planet completed, I think by now you know what this means. Yes, it means more assignments, although unlike the majority of the ones we have already completed in the game, this is one specific assignment that rewards us with a trophy, and that is because it just so happens to be the only assignment added with the DLC, that and the only DLC that was actually included with the Legendary Edition of the first game anyway. This assignment was called Bring Down the Sky, and this had us landing on an asteroid that had been hijacked and was heading straight towards a planet, and if we didn't find a way to somehow change its course, millions would die. Now, while progressing through, we discovered the asteroid was actually being propelled by some huge fusion jet engines, and in order to change its course, we would actually have to go to each one and manually change the coordinates. Now, if you're like me and wondering why the hell an asteroid even has a bunch of jet engines on it, well, that gets answered pretty quickly, and to be fair, it was actually a solid idea. The colonists had sent out a team to bring back this asteroid to their planet's orbit so that they can use it as both a source of building materials, but also turn it into a space station in the process. Again, actually pretty marvellous idea. While adjusting the jets though, we are introduced to one of the Batarians called Charn. Now, he openly tells us that he made a massive mistake in following his leader Balak this far, and only assumed it was going to be a quick slave grab for some quick money. We tell him though that if he forgets about Balak and no longer continues to support his assault on the asteroid, then we will spare the lives of him and his men. Thankfully for him, he made the right choice and he pulls his men off of the asteroid, which now left us to face Balak, and after shooting our way through his forces, we find the man himself, although this was no longer a simple slave grab and at this point had turned into pretty much a full-blown terrorist attack, so there was no way he was leaving here alive, or so we thought. He first tells us that the reason for the attack is because the Alliance gave this planet to a human colony rather than a struggling Batarian colony, and he couldn't let something like that go, and he then tells us that he's changed his mind on the attack, but that if we don't let him walk, he will detonate detonate a bunch of explosives, killing multiple innocent people in the process. Honestly, quite a hard choice to make. You want to save everyone, but letting a terrorist walk free just gives him more reason to pull this kind of stunt again. To be honest though, I wasn't prepared to let a bunch of innocent people die, and if you think about it, we now know who he is, so we could just let him walk and then catch up with him later. Of course we save the innocents, but Balak does unfortunately get away. This does however mean that we have officially saved not just a few innocent lives on an asteroid, but potentially millions on a planet down below. With that though, we complete the DLC quest, earning another trophy. So as of now, I had pretty much completed every side assignment in the game, and we were well on our way towards the final stages of the main story. One of our final main planets that we needed to head to next was the planet of Virmire to assist a Solarian infiltration team who was currently trying to break into a nearby facility heavily guarded by Geth and believed to be one of Sauron's labs. And not long after landing on the planet, while clearing my way towards the Solarians, I managed to unlock my second Legendary Edition additional trophy for killing a total of 1,000 enemies. Once we reached the Solarian team, they explained the situation to us. It turns out that Sauron was actually using this facility to breed an army of Krogan, which wasn't thought possible because of the genophage that plagued the species, rendering them unable to reproduce. Well, apparently Sauron has a cure. Of course, we all know that Sauron plans on using that army in the fight against us, which would at that point kind of make him unstoppable, and so the plan was to blow up the facility with a nuke. Of course, our resident Krogan friend Rex is absolutely furious with the idea that we would stop his race from being cured from the genophage, and was willing to go hammy on anyone nearby. We explained to him though that as much as we want his people to have the cure, this cure isn't the type that would actually be setting them free, and instead they would just be enslaved under Sauron until the Reapers come and wipe out life across the galaxy. But we do promise that we will help look for a cure after all of this is over. Thankfully, we've been a good friend to Rex on our galaxy-saving adventure, and he's able to see reason in what we are saying, and as much as he doesn't want to, he understands what needs to be done. But because we did manage to calm him down and make him see reason, we also unlock the Charismatic trophy. Now during this level, we are also going to need to make a hard choice, and that's because we are going to need to choose between the lives of two of our allies, those being Ashley and Caden, and this is where the start of that choice comes into play, although right now it ultimately doesn't affect the choice we can make later on. You see, to bring down the facility, one team is going to have to concentrate fire on the Geth and keep them away from the plant site while the other team plants the bomb, but ultimately on our way out we will only be able to save one of our teammates. Now while I absolutely love Caden, absolutely fantastic guy with some decent biotics, I've also spent the majority of the game building up my romance towards Ashley, so Ashley is the one I'm going to save. Which I know a lot of you are going to say she's an alien racist, which to a certain extent I get what you mean. But then again, let me remind you that she is on my squad, which mainly consists of aliens. But to be fair, she does improve by the third game. And to be fair, if I was an alien racist, I wouldn't be working with a team full of aliens. Then again, I didn't choose to romance Liara purely because she was blue and wasn't human. But in my defense, my go-to squad is either Rex and Garrus or Rex and Liara, all aliens. We are an inclusive team. Continuing on with the mission though, we find ourselves wiping out countless numbers of Geth and disabling communications and anti-air defences. This eventually lets us get inside the facility where we come across numerous indoctrinated slaves of Sauron. One Asari we came across however wasn't indoctrinated and instead actually voluntarily worked for him, although she realises she's in a pretty crap situation. And because of this, she offers us information and access to Sauron's private files in exchange for letting her go free. We think that's a pretty fair deal, but we don't plan on giving her a ride and tell her that she needs to make her own way out before the place goes nuclear. In Sauron's office, we once again find some type of beacon that proceeds to broadcast visions to our mind, although with the help of the cipher, it becomes much more clearer and understandable. We also end up speaking with what Sauron likes to call Sovereign. What we originally thought to be a Reaper ship turns out to be an actual Reaper. This Reaper tells us that his kind transcends what we call existence, and that this is actually a cycle that happens every 50,000 years or so, and that each time results in the Reapers essentially wiping out all forms of life in the galaxy, as well as doing their best to ensure that very little of anything is left behind, which would explain why our Prothean expert Liara had so little evidence on the Prothean race, and to be fair, why everyone has so little evidence on the Prothean race. At this point though, if Sovereign's willing to expose himself, it's clear that the Reapers were almost ready to launch a full-scale invasion, and so we decide it's time to get back to stopping Saren before they get the chance to do so. Now remember I said a minute ago about having to make a hard choice between what ally to save? Well yeah, it was now time to make that decision, and again, as much as I hate to lose Caden, I have been trying to get into Ashley's pants. So with that, we make our way over to Ashley and the Solarians while Caden defends the nuke with his life, forever losing access to him in the following games. While saving Ashley though, we are confronted by Saren and we have our very first boss fight with him. And this is the one that seemed to give me the most problems. I wasn't sitting here for hours, don't get me wrong, but the severe lack of cover and the ridiculous amount of enemies, one of which being Saren, makes it quite a difficult encounter. We of course manage to defend ourselves before Saren begins to retreat. We have a brief word with him and he tells us that he has the location of the conduit and that the only way to survive is to team up with the Reapers. And at this point it's completely obvious that Saren is well under the effects of Sovereign's indoctrination. He does manage to escape though, and so with that we grab Ashley and escape too. Unfortunately leaving Caden to die, but at least he died a true hero. Sorry Caden buddy, I really do feel bad. To make me feel a little bit better though, we do unlock a trophy for completing another main story mission. We then take our newly gained knowledge that we have received from Saren's office, and with the help of the Cypher and Liara, we managed to work out the location of the conduit and that we would need to head to the Mu relay's coordinates and use the relay to travel to the planet of Ilos. Before we do that though, we decide it's best that we inform the council, as Ilos is located in a part of space not governed by the laws of the Alliance. Turns out though this wasn't the best decision we could have made, as after presenting all of our evidence to the council, they conclude that we have done all we needed to and that travelling to the planet was a no-go, and to top it off they go on to ground the Normandy, preventing us from leaving the Citadel. At this point the only thing we could do was feel sorry for ourselves, and so we headed back to the Normandy to have a breakdown, I guess. I really don't know what was going through Shepard's head here. Turns out though our day was about to get a hell of a lot better as Ashley comes along and begins to comfort us, and we even almost get a kiss, and would have if Joker hadn't interrupted us. But the good news is that being able to romance Ashley soon is now 100% going to happen. After talking to Ashley, we can now focus on a plan to get out of the Citadel and save the galaxy. Thankfully, our boy Anderson, who was also used to getting absolutely shafted by the council, had our back and told us to get the ship ready while he gave the ambassador a nasty hook. After escaping the Citadel, we then proceeded to make our way over to the planet of Ilos, and on our way there we finally get to clap Ashley's cheeks, which manages to nab us our third trophy in the Legendary Edition list for establishing our very first romance. Back to the story. We eventually reach Ilos, where we find an ancient Prothean structure that Saren and the Geth had already started to invade. As we make our way through though, while we don't find any Protheans, we do find an old Prothean virtual intelligence that gives us some insight onto how the Reapers do what they do and also on how we can stop them. The VI tells us that the Citadel, which was also the main council hub of the Protheans, is actually a mass relay, and it's the one that the Reapers use to travel to and from dark space come time of the extinction, and that they are able to do this thanks to the Keepers, the weird bug-like caretakers of the Citadel who would signal them when the time was right and open up the relay. However, some of the Protheans managed to survive the last extinction by hiding inside cryogenic chambers on Ilos, and they actually managed to reverse engineer the Citadel relay and the Keepers, and that because of this, Sovereign had to seek out Saren in order to activate it. He also tells us that the conduit is actually a much smaller mass relay that is essentially an instant backdoor into the Citadel from Ilos, which thankfully we were able to use as Saren had already made his way into the Citadel, and with the help of Sovereign and the Geth began attacking the Citadel in an attempt to override the relay. And at this point we have completed what we needed to do on Ilos, which results in another story related trophy. After using the mass relay to shoot our Mako through space, we land in the Citadel, crushing 2 Geth in the process. Thankfully, this army of Geth was absolutely nothing to us by this point, and we eventually come face to face with Saren. Now, because we have enough Paragon points here, we do have the option of trying to talk him out of his indoctrination, and we kind of succeed. I say kind of because we do manage to get him to see the error of his ways, but he knows that Sovereign's grip on him is too strong, and then he proceeds to off himself. At this point we rush over to the console to put a stop to the Reaper invasion, however this wasn't the end just yet as the council ship begins to get attacked. Now throughout the whole game they have been kind of like big a-holes to us, and while we could have let them die and just focused on Sovereign, I thought screw it, why not save them and hopefully later they can kiss my ass. On top of the council getting attacked, Sovereign had also managed to take control of Saren's body through his implants, turning him into A, one of the coolest looking bosses in Mass Effect 1, and B, one of the most annoying boss fights in Mass Effect 1. It wasn't even hard, but he just kept jumping around like constantly, and by the time he stopped he'd spawn a bunch of enemies I then had to deal with, which let him regen his shield. Thankfully my squad did have biotics and I was able to spam the lift ability to keep him from moving around as often as I could, but he still hopped around a hell of a lot more than I would have liked. This ultimately didn't matter though, we are the hero of this game, so this of course could only end one way. We take down Saren, Joker pilots the Normandy like an absolute champ and assists in saving the council and blowing the shit out of Saren. And with that, we have now officially saved the galaxy. For now at least anyway. While Sovereign had been taken care of, the Reapers were still a very real threat and very much out there eager to return. For now though, it was time for a well-earned rest and time to focus on rebuilding and regaining our strength for the war to come. Of course, this brings an end to the game, unlocking our final story-related trophy, our 4th Legendary Edition trophy for completing the game on Insanity, and of course the one we've all been waiting for, the Platinum Trophy.
We have gathered here to recognize the enormous contributions of the Alliance.
And with that being the Platinum Trophy, this means we now have the first of 4 Mass Effect games 100% completed, as well as earning a total of 4 out of the 11 trophies added with the Legendary Edition trophy list. So after obtaining as close to 100% game completion as possible and around about 27 hours later, what are my thoughts on the Mass Effect 1 Platinum experience as a whole? Well, for the most part I thoroughly enjoyed it. When it came to storytelling and lore building, I think they have done a phenomenal job. In terms of gameplay, while I can appreciate that at the time it was actually considered fairly decent, nowadays it just doesn't hold up as well as I'd like it to. Although that's not saying there isn't any fun to be had, because there really is a lot of fun. A nice little combo, especially one I like to use at the end of the game, was the lift skill followed by a throw. It was absolutely hilarious just seeing enemies fly off into space. For the locations, if I'm being honest, the only ones I was actually interested in exploring were the story related planets. I just felt like all of the other planets you could visit that wasn't a necessity felt so barren it was unreal, and trying to maneuver the Mako through some of the terrain was appalling. Like, I get they're Uncharted, but there could be a little bit more there, man, you know? Saying that though, this is definitely a game that I would give as a platinum recommendation any day, and urge some of you who maybe hasn't even experienced this to give it a shot. Anyway guys, this does now bring us to the end of the video. Please let me know your thoughts on the Mass Effect series down in the comments below, and what one are you most interested in seeing me platinum. If you guys enjoyed the video, then a like and a share would be very muchas gracias, and if you haven't already, then make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn notifications on to stay up to date with everything I upload. I hope you all have a great day, and I'll see you all in the next video.